Oh. Oh. With your eyes still closed, feel your heart beating. Remember that science is not causing your heart to beat, rather the divine is. That same divinity is causing every being's heart to beat. Hari Om, and greetings from Niagara Falls. Welcome to our Chinmaya Setukari West, or the Evolving Adults in the West, our wellness mentorship program. We began our program in January. We've now completed 3 months. We have flowed through a orientation, a workshop facilitated by a professional, a workshop facilitated by our advisors, and now we're continuing with another workshop facilitated by a professional. One of the most universal scriptures, the script to be followed in Sanatana Dharma, is Bhagavad Gita. And this is about Prince Arjuna, who is the ideal personality in every way. Yet, he's going through a crisis. This is not a capability crisis in terms of position or possession or pleasure. He is struggling with an identity crisis. He doesn't know who he is, so he doesn't know what to do. And this is most clear because Bhagavan Krishna doesn't give him anything external, like armor or a horse. Bhagavan Krishna offers to him Brahma Vidya. Vidya is that which helps us to remember. Remember what? Brahma, which means infinity or oneness. Bhagavan Krishna helps Prince Arjuna to remember that he is not separate from the Pandavas, not separate from Dharma, not separate from any entity. That there is only oneness. Dozens of you, if not all of you, have heard Bhagavad Gita before. You've heard me share this message in meaningful mornings before. Do you feel that oneness? Do you feel you're not separate from your family, from your friends? Though this is simple, what is being shared, this is difficult to practice, which is why satsanga is most important. Sangha means to associate, like we're all doing right now. And sat has many meanings. One of the most tactile meanings is nobility. Associating with nobility And one of the most tactile expressions of nobility is inclusivity. The more inclusive you are, the more in tune with nobility and oneness you are. And this will be the vision, the focus of our workshop. And so now we'll begin, not from an unprofessional way, you got to hear me, onto a professional way.
So thank you so much for joining our second workshop of well, technically our third, but our second workshop with one of our speakers, Nina Bhattacharya. So we're so excited to have Nina. She's actually on the committee, so she's coordinating this program. If you are part of Chinmay Mission Michigan, or specifically Flint, you probably remember growing up with Nina. She's been a part of their Bal Vihar program for many years, and she's now based out of Boston and is a Sevika in Boston. She supports a lot of the Chinmay Mission Niagara virtual classes, so you might have seen her leading and coordinating the Power Hour for youth. And she is involved in a lot of special projects. So you might hear her voice. She's one of the producers behind the Live Vedanta podcast. And in her professional life, she's a global health educator and community organizer at Harvard University. And she designs inclusive and interdisciplinary learning experiences that really encourage people to experiment, fail, and grow. So we're so excited to have Nina here today and to lead us in this session. Thank you, Nina.
Okay, it seems like usually I'm the Zoom support person, so now I have to figure out how to like spotlight myself. Ah, there we go. Hello, Nina's face. Hariom, everyone. It is so delightful to be here with each and every one of you, to see so many familiar faces and so many new ones as well. I am definitely like sweating too much right now, but we're just gonna dive right into it. We're in it together. It's going to be great. Let me share my screen, share some slides. And I promise, Vivekji, no soothing elevator music. Okay. So, Hariom again. My name is Nina. I take she, her, or any pronoun really, so long as I know that you're talking to me. I'm comfy with either, any, rather. And as I'm introducing myself lightly, I encourage you to take a moment to rename yourselves and include your pronouns as well, if you would like to. It's a good experiment, and we're just here to experiment and try some new things together. Anyway, as Pooja alluded to in her very generous introduction, I'm an educator, I'm a community organizer. In essence, what I do at Harvard is create learning experiences that are most inclusive to all of our students. And that also includes creating experiences for faculty and researchers as well, and creating an experience where adults can learn and experiment and inhabit their best selves. Believe it or not, as one gets older, sometimes it feels less and less comfortable to make mistakes. And part of my job is to create an environment that feels like maybe we can take a step back, take a deep breath, and just try and see what happens. I wear a lot of different hats in terms of the topics I'm interested in. Right now, I'm putting on my educator hat. However, my professional background and study is in global health education. And particularly my interest in this work that we're doing right now is one, is I identify as a queer South Asian woman. Second, my prior research has focused on the relationship of trans youth and the relationship with their parents. And it's something I care deeply about as someone who works with youth on a regular basis. And in fact, something that I'm looking forward to, you heard it here first, I'll be going back to school in the fall to pursue social work so I can continue collaborating with youth in a very dynamic way. I'm so excited. Okay, now that we have had a little bit of time to settle, maybe rename ourselves, I want you to time travel with me. And in order to time travel with me, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, because that is the best way to time travel. So I'm going into gallery view where I can see each and every one of you, and I invite you to close your eyes gently. And as we rewind back in time, I invite you to imagine a time or a moment or a place where you felt like you belonged. Was it an experience Was it a person that helped you feel like you belonged? Was it a place? And I want you to evoke this memory in as much detail as possible. Because as we all know from time travel movies, if you don't include enough detail, you will end up in the wrong place. So you want to add as much detail as possible. How old were you? What did you look like then? How did you feel before the experience, after? Was it a sudden moment, or was it a feeling that developed over time? What did belonging smell like, taste like? Weird questions, right? But maybe it sparks something different for you. And just rest there and like hold on to this tender, gorgeous place. Because in a few moments, I want you to take this feeling that we've time traveled to, this moment, place, person we've time traveled to, and bring that into the present. So get ready, we're coming back to the present. Everyone gently open your eyes. And in the chat, what are some of the adjectives, the words that came up for you as we time traveled? I want to know. One, this is a conversation, it's a workshop. Cozy, fun, comfort, open, joy. It tasted like comfort food. Feeling loved, content, safe, non-judgmental, relief. Oh, that's a powerful word. Relaxed. My soul was happy. The sound of the shruti box, joy, the smell of coffee, togetherness, authentic, needed, at peace. It tasted like birthday cake. I love all of these precious, precious details. The smell of flowers, accomplished, loved. I'm seeing a lot of threads in what all of you have shared. And can you imagine across all of these different experiences, places, people, moments in time, you've brought such similar values, adjectives into our present. And I want you to wrap that like a blanket around you as we embark on the rest of this workshop. Because again, this isn't me just listing a bunch of facts at you. Google does a much better, more accurate job of that than I can. But this is for us to get like a little comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so for that to happen, I want us to embrace 4 affirmations. Affirmations are great because they're technically aspirations, things that make us feel comfy and that we want to move towards. And it's totally okay if we don't hit it. We will be open. That's the first thing. We'll be open. Next affirmation, we will be curious. We will embrace making mistakes. And this is where the part where I really want to assure you, particularly during the Q&A, to ask that quote unquote stupid question you've had on your mind. I'm not here to judge you for the words that you use. I know sometimes, particularly for those of us where gender and sexuality feel like a new whole set of vocabulary we haven't experienced, it can be intimidating. So we're taking that off the table. We're going to make mistakes and it's going to be okay. This is a particular place where you can do that, right? And we'll be gentle with ourselves. That's the most important part. There might be times where like this could evoke experiences, feelings, memories that might be painful or a little bit tender. And so if you need to turn off your camera, go ahead, you do you. The activist and beautiful thinker Adrienne Marie Brown calls this self-defined care. I don't know what you need, but you know what you need. And if that's like taking a sip of water in the middle or turning off your camera or maybe signing out for a bit, hey, this is going to be recorded. It'll be available to you when you need it, if you need it, okay? And the thing is, it's only so fast that you can like move through gallery view to see all of your faces. So like if you need it's okay. You do you. Okay. Oh, I feel better. I hope all of you are feeling a little bit better. I feel a little more calm, a little more relaxed and affirmed. So we're just going to get into it. We're going to try 3 things today. We're going to go over some words. So we're speaking a little bit of the same language. We're going to put it into context. And then we're going to think about some practices to take with us as we design inclusive spaces in our families, communities, societies, etc. And this is for the record. We all have our own stories of gender and sexuality. This is like my big disclaimer that I want all of us to hold, in addition to these experiences that we've brought with us from the past. You know, I'm going to do a quick poll here. Raise your hand, or if you were not allowed to perform enter a Monday because you were on your period. I'm raising my hand. Yep, I see a lot of hands raised. Raise your hand if you weren't allowed to cut your hair because it would be perceived as too boyish, or you weren't allowed to grow your hair because it'd be perceived as too effeminate. I see some hands raised. See, like, we all have experiences with gender and sexuality. Oftentimes we write it off as LGBTQ, but all of us, even if you don't identify with this alphabet soup, are included in that. So I just wanted to put that out there. I also wanted to share that I do not have all of the answers. So there might be times as we engage in dialogue, particularly during the Q&A, where I might say, hey, I don't know, that's a beautiful question. And we can follow up offline, and just see in the faces here, all of you are such a wealth of experience. So if you have something to contribute that just would add on to a response that I have, or you have something in a totally different direction, please share it in the chat. We're crowdsourcing together. This is a community, and this is what we're really good at. Okay, disclaimers aside, there we go. Okay, LGBTQIA. That's a whole lot in one acronym. Sometimes you'll see it in longer forms, sometimes you'll see it in shorter forms. We're going to dig into this, a little bit of 101, so we can think about a couple concepts more clearly. Okay, if I'm distracted, it's because I'm trying to arrange my tiny 13-inch screens in a way where I can see you and my slides. Technology. Okay, 3 things. We're going to talk about sex, we're going to talk about gender, and we're going to talk about sexuality. And for this part, please just don't take notes. Don't take notes. I want you to put your pencils down and just absorb, because this is a lot to process. And I'd rather you just feel like cozy, comfortable listening than trying to furiously take notes like we're in one of Vivekji satsangs. Save that for a different time. Okay, sex. Classification of a person as male, female, or intersex. It's typically assigned by a doctor at birth based on one's genitals. It may or may not correspond to one's gender. And so I'll have the definition, and then on the right, I'll have some of the common terms that you will see. So for example, when the doctor assessed Nina at birth, Nina had specific genitals, so they said she is female. So that is the example that we do here, okay? And something to note, and we won't really be able to get into it here, is that there are a lot of, I encourage you to look up intersex activism in particular. A lot of people are assigned a particular sex at birth that they don't really have a choice over one way or another, and that has ramifications for later development. So a lot of folks are doing some rightful activism in that space. Okay, so if gender, or if sex is about based on these physical characteristics assigned at birth that we typically don't have any agency over, gender is in the opposite direction. And there's 2 aspects of gender. One is identity, that is our internal understanding, and expression, how we present ourselves. So, for example, okay, I'm going to do this. So when you see me, what do you notice? How would you describe my appearance? Type in the chat. Please, only nice things. Wow, chat silent. Oh, thank you, Rashmi. Beautiful, vibrant, beautiful, happy. Awesome. Colorful, accurate, Neha. Vivacious. Oh, okay. That's what the pep talk I needed. Long hair. So some of these I'm noticing we might code like, beautiful, right? Those are typically we associate with feminine presentation. Oh, sunflowery. I like that adjective. Anyway, so these are things that you're noticing about my gender expression, how I'm presenting to you. You wouldn't really know anything about my gender identity unless I told you. So that's something important to keep in mind. Gender identity is inside, and it's really up to the person to whether or not they want to share that, okay? And just because someone has blue hair, long hair, short hair, tall, short, wears certain kind of clothes, has a nose piercing, bajillion tattoos, whatever, you can't ascribe a particular gender to them. Just briefly, very, very, very briefly. Oh, actually, pictures. Pictures will help. So typically, this is how we understand gender, boy, girl. What we're trying to say, what a lot of people are trying to shift towards is that, hey, it's like more of a color palette. Things are mixed. Things might be a little bit blurry. They're not specifically defined. And it's fluid. Gender fluid is a great term for this. And some days, ooh, can everyone hear me? Okay, cool. My headphones are doing the thing where they're like
Yeah, you were cutting in and out a little bit, Nina, but you're back.
Okay, I am back. Give me 1 second, pals. I want to make sure you hear me. Hello. Testing.
Yeah, we can hear
Perfect. You. Sorry, I don't know why Zoom is like that right now. Okay. So we're talking about gender right now, and we're talking about how it can be fluid. It doesn't have to specifically be one thing or another. And most importantly, gender identity and gender expression are two different things. So just because I look one way doesn't necessarily mean I identify in a particular way. And then sexuality. This is a huge category that I won't dive all the way down into, but includes desire across sexual, physical, romantic, and emotional dimensions. And a lot of people identify these three dimensions because they're not all the same. On average, it would be cool if they were all the same, but it's not necessarily. Like the people I'm attracted to sexually may not be the type of people I'm attracted to romantically, and might not be the type of people I develop deep emotional connections with, right? Not right, but I'm saying this is the case. And so some of the alphabet soup of words that you might hear describing sexuality would be like lesbian, gay, bisexual, heterosexual, queer, which is previously has been used as a derogatory word, but in the past, I would say 10 years or so, has been reclaimed, and people do use it as an identifier. That's what I identify as. Asexual or pansexual. So there's a lot of different words in this space, and it can be hard to keep track. But I encourage you to just embrace the large diversity of vocabulary we have to describe ourselves. So again, people might think, okay, we have maybe bisexual, well, we have heterosexual, they overlap, boy, girl, I think is what it's saying. We have gay and we have lesbian. Okay, it's a lot more complicated. It kind of looks like this. It's sort of like the first circle, except everything's overlapping. It's a palette. And think of the number of different ways you can mix colors. that's another way you can think of how we can mix together sexual romantic attraction as well as our emotional connection. The cool thing is, and I was like diving into the data before this, is that the Trevor Project, which is an amazing organization, just released its 2020 national survey of over 40,000 LGBTQ plus youth in the United States. And this is some of the like broad diversity of words that young people use to describe themselves. There were over 100 plus words they used to describe their gender. There was over 100 plus words that they just used to describe their sexuality. Just like sit with that for a minute. Over 100 different words they used to describe their gender, over 100 different words to describe their sexuality. I was reading something this morning, actually a friend shared it with me, and it was talking about how our personalities might have, it's perfectly normal for one's personality to have evolved during pandemic. There were some research studies about it. And I was thinking, this fits in so well for what we're talking about right now. We can evolve, we can change. Maybe one day I'm identifying as agender and another day I'm identifying as bigender. We have more and more words to be specific of how we're moving around in the world. And we know for a fact, as folks who are living, breathing Vedanta, that language matters. Like there's a reason we're going verse by verse of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita every day in meaningful mornings. Sometimes we need more than one day on a particular verse, right? Because each word unlocks so much. And similarly, I would say here, with the words that we use to describe our personal experiences and the ways we move in the world, that's equally important. Yes, agency is one of my favorite words when it comes to talking about anything related to youth, anything related to adults, anyone, period. Agency is a gorgeous word because it's saying it's not about whether or not I ascribe a label to myself. In fact, maybe I'm confused. Maybe I am trans, maybe I'm not. Maybe I am lesbian, maybe I'm not. Maybe I am heterosexual, maybe I'm not. I'm not sure. But what's most important is that I have the choice. I have the agency to make that decision for myself. So when we're thinking about youth, when we're thinking about young people, when we're thinking about older people who are also who are being exposed to different ways of being in the world, do they have a choice to make that decision for themselves? That is like the key thing I want people to walk away with, is like, how do we create experiences as Balvihar teachers, as friends, as classmates, as community members, where people have the agency to define themselves on their own terms, right? Like we hear so many Sanskrit words that are like swadharma, right? Or swadhyaya, like it's about yourself. There is an element of agency ascribed in those words where we're going, where you have the choice. The work is on you. You have that agency, you have that freedom. Another reason why language matters, and I want to say that like something that I hear frequently from some folks is that it's really hard to remember someone's pronouns. It can be, yeah. It takes practice. But we also know people who've gone to the Vedanta course and took sannyas diksha and they've come back, and we've been perfectly okay calling them by the new name that has been given to them. So I just want to like cheekily nudge you with my elbow and say that it is possible. We do it. We just have to choose to prioritize this when it comes to other people. And why do we do it when it comes to our, acharyas? It's because we respect them, right? So that same kind of respect has to be ascribed to every single other person in our vicinity, in our little bubble, in our experience. And this is, okay, let me see if I'm just going to say this slide does have data that talks about suicide. So if you would like to turn off your camera or pause, I completely understand. I want to hone in on the fact that language matters. 40% of LGBTQ youth in 2020 seriously considered suicide. 6 in 10 LGBTQ youth said someone attempted to convince them to change their gender or sexuality. Drilling into that bit, it's really interesting. 35% of it was a family member, then was another relative, then was a religious leader, and then friend. I think those were the top 4. Think of that. So for young people, 4 categories of the really important relationships saying that the way you are considering yourself is not okay. And then the last part as well, 1 in 3 LGBTQ youth report being physically threatened or harmed in their lifetime due to gender or sexuality. This study is just with the age group 14 to 24. And they're saying 1 in 3 youth have reported being physically threatened or harmed. That's like not a lot of life to have experienced that much pain, honestly. This is not okay. And I meant to pull out the statistics from like a broader national level, but we all are familiar that like mental health, particularly for this adolescent age group, the age of our J-chicks and chicks, experiences a lot of issues around mental health, suicidality, okay? So just honing in that language matters. This is not the only thing that matters to LGBTQ youth, let's be clear. There's so many things, you know, they might want you to care about what their favorite TV show is, like, you know, what their favorite sport is, how they did in school. But it's hard for them to consider any of those other things. It's hard for us to consider any of those other things if they're focusing literally on whether their experience in the world is valid, right? And I want you to like screenshot this if you need it. If you are experiencing any thoughts of suicidality, or if you are a friend wanting to support another friend or family member, you can call these lines. Like, you don't have to be the one experiencing an issue to seek support from these lines. So I've included numbers for both Canada and the US. I'm gonna like pause for a second so I can copy and paste into the chat so it's easier for you. So I see now that I'm like taking a minute to look at the chat is the data specific to the US, North America? Yes, the Trevor Project research is specific to US and North America. Not unfortunately, but unsurprisingly, there are fewer data sets that are available, fewer efforts that are available documenting the needs of LGBTQ youth outside of North America. And that's actually like in my background as a public health person, I was in a global health program, but my research was focused specifically on youth in the United States. Why? Because it's not safe for everyone to be out. It's not safe for everyone to participate in a study in other countries. It's barely safe for them to do it here. So that is a great question and a really brief answer. Okay, we're gonna shake it out. Take a minute, shake it out. I know we're whizzing through some things. It is totally fine if only 2 out of 50 things I said stuck in your head. That's how it is for me right now. Okay. Next. Now I need a little bit of help again, a little bit of audience participation. Okay, in looking at this diagram, this slice of rainbow cake, if you will, from a Vedantic context. What does this tell you? What might this tell you? Just guess. I'm going to let that simmer for a couple of minutes. 4 ashramas of life, says Rashmi. Vignesh adds, our responsibility is to serve the whole. Mahati, individuals make up the world. We are all one. We must prioritize our well-being, inclusivity. We are interconnected. Oh, hi, Anjal. Sources of identity, our debts, Yajna spirit, roles in life. Start to love yourself, then family, community, and society. Yeah, like we all work together. You hit on the things I wanted to talk about and some. This is beautiful. Right, in Vedanta, in our classes, so often we talk about how we must first start focusing on the individual, then we think a little bit bigger to the family, then the community and society, and probably in the white space, and I didn't add that, there is humanity, right? We are widening our sphere, we're widening our bubble. The cool thing is, so many other fields of research have taken this very diagram from Sanatana Dharma. In family systems theory, so this is an exact diagram from a research paper I wrote, surprise or not, I just changed the label. In family systems theory, it's talking about specifically that yellow slice of cake, I would say mango flavored cake, if you will, that our interactions within the family unit are shaped by influences from the society level, community level. That seems pretty intuitive, right? Like if there are stressors in our work environment, in our school environments, in the neighborhood we're living in, that might affect the dynamics that are happening at home, our relationships with each other. So taking this specifically to our work as parents, as classmates, as friends, etc. In family systems theory, we know that like young people who have supportive families and communities have better mental health outcomes. Data is just there. So I want you to keep that in mind. Okay, this first with our Vedanta hat on, we're supposed to grow our spheres of influence, or not spheres of influence, or spheres of care, spheres of empathy. Then with our family systems theory hat on, which I don't know if you'd wear that hat very often, but the idea that things in our environment affect the unit of the family in particular, which include young people and older people. Okay. And then in public health, whoa, another discipline that uses the same exact diagram, social determinants of health. I know there's a couple of public health people in here, so I got really excited. Social determinants of health, that like the places where we wake up, where we breathe, where we go to school, where we go to work, they affect how we operate and move. They affect our health outcomes. They affect our mental health outcomes. I was really excited when I noticed that this very diagram infused 3 very similar yet different disciplines. Again, for a young person, for a queer person, how the people I'm surrounded by really affect my mental health, the people I work with, and like whether or not, let's say, my health insurance covers, like allows for chosen family, maybe someone who isn't related to me by blood, but is so significant in my life to be in the hospital room with me. These are all things that are like within the sphere of social determinants of health. And oh, this is just like it wouldn't be a presentation if I didn't drop a Audre Lorde quote. She is an incredible writer, poet, Black feminist activist. And she's written, without community, there is no liberation. And when I read that quote, I literally like threw the book across the room, because I feel like this is something we dig into every single satsang we're in together. Like, why are we all gathering here on a Sunday night? Like, why? Why are we gathering every single morning and every single evening for meaningful mornings or easy evenings, or for going to Bhavihar class on Sundays, or like joining one of the many courses available to us? Why are we doing that? For me, this is the quote that captures the why, right? And maybe it means something different to you. That's totally cool. I would love to hear it. But I think when we have these wellness workshops, it's, yes, we're quote unquote professionals sharing quote unquote expertise, but it's with this vision of being together, in this vision of joyful kinship, and this vision of mutual flourishing towards liberation that we're thinking about. Anyway, okay, practice. Here's a little, it's not alliteration, unfortunately, so I failed in that regard for Vivekji, but it is something memorable. It's a mango. It's and an is like 3 things you can take with you as we end our session together. The first is assess. I received a really good question from someone in this room that asked, hey, I actually don't live in a very diverse place. Like, how do I know I'm practicing inclusivity? If the community I'm in, we're all kind of the same. That's a really great question. But you consume media, you read books, you might listen to podcasts, you might choose to donate places, you listen to the news somewhere. I encourage you to think about, to do an audit. Like, one year I did an audit of all the books I read, and I assessed which books were by authors of color and which books were by men, which books were by women, etc., etc. And I just assessed, what were my general reading trends? And what I input shapes how I think. So that is a super easy way. If you live in a place that your community might not feel diverse, assess what you're inputting. What shows are you watching? What is the representation there? So that's one tip. And the last bit is context. Assess context. Sometimes you have a really good question. It may not be the right time to ask that question. Sometimes you want to use someone's pronouns correctly, accurately, in the most empathetic, embracing way possible, but it may not be the right moment to ask. Or you want to hear about their journey and their story, but maybe the time and place isn't right. Or you have a question, but you haven't done your research beforehand. You haven't done the Google. So sometimes do the Google first, then ask the question. Because when it comes to things like sex, gender, sexuality, some of these things feel very deeply personable. And for example, I'm very open in talking about this because I'm making myself available and open to talk about this. But not everyone's in that case, and they don't owe it to any of us. Okay, boundaries are beautiful. We love boundaries in this house. So always assess context. The second part of is ask, don't assume, because we know what happens when you assume. I don't have to spell that out for you. Ask. If you have a question, ask. If you aren't sure, ask. So often, today I was at a garden center. I was buying some plants. And I literally stood there for 10 minutes because I was afraid to ask one of the people there about if the plant needed watering on a weekly basis or every 2 days, and what kind of light. Don't be like Nina. Ask. There's no shame in that. Oftentimes we don't ask because we feel scared. We don't want to look stupid. There's none of that. Ask. And for anyone who's for young people in particular who might be thinking about having conversations about this with your parents, maybe ask what the context they're coming from is. Yeah? That might give you a little more education, a little more space, time to consider how you need to frame your message, if at all. Yeah? So that's something to think about. And then finally, model some simple shifts. So for example, at the beginning, I said, Haryom, my name is Nina. I take she, her, or any pronoun you would like to use. In doing so, I have modeled for you a social gesture that I think is good. And if you choose to follow that, awesome. And if you choose not to follow that, also awesome. Like there's no pressure either way. You have the agency to decide what you do next. Okay, so there's simple shifts. One of our Setukaris in this room teaches Balvyar, and one of his chicks asked, what are ways we can talk about LGBTQ plus issues in like conservative Hindu communities and contexts? And I would say like start with simple shifts. Like one simple shift I remember distinctly was when creating a registration form for a chick camp in a nameless location several years ago. And we just added pronouns. We just added that into the registration form. Simple shift. But then it gave us a sensibility of like who was in the room, like who we needed to create space for. Like in general, we need to aspire for the most inclusive space as possible. But when you do simple shifts, it really usually doesn't take that much more effort. So something to think about. Assess your context, assess the moment, assess your inputs, then ask, don't assume, and then finally model the simple shifts. Be the person you would love to interact with. Okay, before we transition into like announcements and Vivekji wrapping up before dialogue, I thought I would cover a couple of questions really rapid fire, and we can totally dig into this more, but I thought it'd be fun to do rapid fire because they all have one word answers. Do I have to come out? No. Does who I date or marry change my identity? No. I used to think I was insert a particular identity, and now I think I'm insert something else. Is that okay? Yes. You can choose whenever you want. Remember, color palette, mix colors. You can mix colors anytime you want. Do I have to have medical surgery to be trans? No. Is there an appropriate age where someone knows their gender or sexuality? Also no. And I'm saying that really specifically because I've been in conversation in community with a couple other Setukaris where we've come out later in life, like, and that a lot of people didn't have the words for it. So they've been trying to figure out how do I reconcile how I've been living previously and how I think of myself now. There's no appropriate age. Is it okay if I don't relate to any labels? Like, do I have to have a label? No, you don't have to have a label. Okay. Oh, okay, we did it. There's some confetti. You know, I was like so utterly nervous for all of this because there's so much to share in such a short period of time. So like I'm so grateful for each and every one of you for like hanging in there. Yeah, I'm gonna turn it over to Sheetal for some announcements. Then Vivekji is gonna share some thoughts to close out, and then I'll be around for some Q&A. Yes, Sheetal.
Thanks, Nina. Thank you so much for such a beautiful talk. This has been so meaningful and informative, and we're so grateful that you've taken out the time to share your expertise. I would like to make a couple of announcements, after which Vivekji will make some closing remarks. And at 10 Eastern, we would love for all of you to stay back as we will start our Q&A session. So firstly, Maharama Jayanti is taking place on Wednesday from 9 to 10 Eastern. You may click on the link in the chat to register. And next we have Matra Bhava Puja on Mother's Day, which is on May 9th from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern, also with details in the link shared. And now I would like to invite Vivekji for the closing remarks. Hariom.
Right on, Sheetal. Right on, Nina, and Pooja also, who spoke. being part of this wellness mentorship program as a participant and as an organizer is very fulfilling. So much of what Nina shared today, I have directly had to address in our youth camps in DC, in Boston, in Houston. Many of our youth have questions about their gender, their sexuality, and having a space and having someone who's has a professional sense about this is very fulfilling, is very relieving. That was one of the words that some of you used about Nina's visualization. I'm very happy to see what our Setukaris are doing. Last night, we had a large meeting we have 40 centers in America, Chinmay Mission centers. The board members and the Setukaris from these 40 centers all gathered to discuss how to support our Chinmay University in Kerala. This is one of Swami Chinmayananda's dreams, is to have a university that focused on Indic knowledge systems, traditional learning, infusing the sacred into the secular, and observing how our Setukaris were inspired was most moving, and now tonight getting to see that again is most moving. My gratitude to all of you for being who you are and doing what you do. This is needed. Our Chinmay University is needed. Thinking about my experience in business school, it's so easily forgettable. So what? I did it, and I can barely remember anything that was so moving about my time. Whereas studying in the ashram, there's not a moment that goes by where I don't reference the ashram. You hear that in my classes. So we need a Chinmay University where people can feel the meaning of education. And we need this wellness mentorship program specifically about what we focused on today. Our youth, they don't have their parents to go to. They don't have their teachers to go to. So who do they go to? It is mentors like you that are trained by people like Sheetal and Pooja and Nina that allows them to be more liberated in a relative sense. Such a program, such workshops need to start to percolate into all of our centers, into all of our communities. So today, if you felt that this was meaningful, then try to facilitate a similar workshop for the high school students, the college students in your own centers. If you go through who's part of this workshop right now, there's many parents whose kids cannot talk to those parents about their gender and sexuality. I know this personally. And I'm so happy to see those parents that are here to become more acquainted, even with the terminology. Leave alone the philosophy, but just the terminology, so that there's more of a holistic relationship. There's more oneness rather than dvaita or separation. Please continue to be steady and sincere in this mentorship program. If you're not a mentee or a mentor, then apply. Write to us. We're always looking for more mentors because we need more mentors. We have an excess number of mentees. So do be part of this and be part of the programs that are happening. This Wednesday, when we celebrate Bhagwan Rama's Jayanti, I will share with you in more detail how our Setukaris, and I'm specifically identifying our evolving adults, are leading an effort to raise $3.5 million in 35 days. That's amazing. For us, it's a struggle to raise $350, but collectively, we will be able to raise $3.5 million in 35 days exactly. So I'll share how you can be part of this movement when we celebrate Bhagwan Rama's Jayanti. And our Matra Puja, Sheila's sitting beside me. So Sheila is a mother, we're parents, and many of you are. That's fine, not at the cost of forgetting our original parent. In Bhagavatam today, for many of you are in the class I'd shared, Bhagavan Krishna is the Sarva Deva and Sarva Pitra, which means the original God, the original parent. And our Matra Puja is an opportunity for us to focus on our original parent, because we forget that too often. Then we become like the Prince Arjuna who's going through an identity crisis. And Bhagavan Krishna has to remind him that you're not separate from me. This is a workshop and not a discourse, so I'm gonna pause here. But I love it so much, I can't help myself. We will complete this workshop technically with a prayer for our own swasti, for everyone's swasti. And then after that, the workshop will continue. I know you have lots of questions, and what better forum for you to ask open questions and receive open answers than this forum? So do stay on, and even if you're unsure about your question, someone else will ask it, or Nina will bring it up anyways. So make note of that. And if you're not on the East Coast and maybe some of your children are still awake, tell them to sit beside you right now and just listen and observe. Shanti, Shanti, Shantihi. Be safe, be sound, be serene, be happiness. And we continue.
Hariom, everyone. Again, I'm going to invite and open up the chat for some dialogue. You can ask a question by using the raise hand function. That is probably the easiest way to inquire. But do know that this session is being recorded, so if you're not comfortable with that, just directly message me. We can get chatting. In fact, maybe we can take a minute to think about what our question might be. Sometimes when I'm processing, I feel so overwhelmed. I'm like, I know I have questions, but I don't even know what to ask. So I'm just going to take a minute before Sagar asks his question. I'll call on you, Sagar, in a second. Let's process. Maybe jot down the question, type it in the chat, raise your hand. I'm going to take a drink of water. Also, I just wanted to scroll through everyone's faces. Oh, okay, well, I have a moment to process myself. We'll start with Sagar, and then I'll try to alternate between the chat. Okay?
Hi, I'm Nina. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I thought I'd start off with a simple question, just because it's a common thing that I've seen in work circles, obviously within our mission circles and just in society in general. I know it relates to the focus of today's wellness workshop, but what is the kind of history or the background around establishing pronouns? I know it relates to this topic, but I've always just generally wondered, how it kind of relates, or, like at work, people usually put pronouns next to their name, even if they don't really have a proper identification, but they just do it as a courtesy to be respectful of their peers and mentors. So I was wondering out of curiosity, I know it relates to this, but I just didn't know how or what the history around it was. So thought I'd get it started there. Thank you, Hariom.
Awesome. Thank you for that question, Sagar. It is true, like in a lot of workplaces, we're seeing an increasing trend where folks are adding their pronouns to the Zoom. They might add it to the badge. Like if you're in a place that has like you're at a conference, for example. Remember when we went to conferences in person? Yeah, you might have pronouns there. The history of it, I'm not so sure. But what I would like to gently nudge in return is pronouns are not a preference. It's not like, there used to be a time where I used to say preferred pronouns. And then I had a mentor who gently corrected me and was saying, like, these are not arbitrary choices people are making. We can decide, but like it's not a preference for some and not a like optional for the others, you know? And we all have a gender and we all have pronouns. So when we're putting it on our badges or adding it into the Zoom chat, we're not just doing it as a courtesy for folks who use something that is outside of the binary of she, her, he, him. We're doing it because I also, even though I live in concordance with my she, her pronouns, I want people to use them. You know, so I would say in return is that I think there's an emphasis on diversity, equity, inclusion in a lot of workplaces. So there is an increase in adding pronouns to work spaces, but it benefits all of us. This is one of those cases where like we make the umbrella large so more people can fit under. Okay, I'm going to go for a question from the chat. Rashmi asks, what are some good resources to get more educated on this topic? That is a great question. I'm going to put a pin in it in some ways so that I can like share some resources on our website or Chinmay Niagara website so that you can access more readily. There's a couple, again, that I can think of off the top of my head is the Trevor Project. That is a huge one, particularly for working with youth. I can think of like a lot of other organizations like the Okra Project that helps supports food insecure folks or food insecure trans folks. There's obviously GLAD. There's a lot, and I want to provide a more comprehensive list. So TBD on that. This is a great moment to get more educated on this topic. I'm learning so much because at present, 33 states in the US have anti-trans legislation under consideration, which affects the health and well-being of our young people. So this is a perfect moment to dig into more. Archana ji, before I call on you, I'm going to take one more from the chat and then I'll call on you. As a parent of young kids, what is the best way to introduce conversations around this topic? Age to bring these topics up, considering the sensitivity, maybe books, stories, etc. I think there's ways to implicitly model. This is a great opportunity to take like a more Montessori style education approach, which I know, Ricky, you appreciate, and model what you would like your children to act like. Maybe it's introducing themselves with their pronouns. Maybe let's say that's a norm that you would appreciate. Maybe it's taking a look at what characters are in their books. Do they show children experimenting with their gender expression? A book that comes to mind is The Boy Who Wears a Bindi by Vivek Shreya. The title is self-explanatory. It's about a young boy who wears a bindi, and it's really cute. So that might be something worth exploring. In addition, there's some books from a fellow Setukari who runs the publishing house Mango and Marigold Press, which feature families with like, you know, 2 moms or 2 dads and things like that. So you can find South Asian focused books that represent diverse communities and families. And I don't think it's sensitive in the same way that like from a young age that we're teaching them like familiarity with their body, like with when you're teaching them how to use the bathroom and stuff like that, you're referring to body parts oftentimes, right? Like you're developing a vocabulary with them about something people might call sensitive in that regard. And if you can develop vocabulary on body parts and like what is good contact with people and what is bad contact with people, you know, ideas of consent, which as a parent, you really care about the safety and well-being of your child, like these things will just naturally come up. Maybe it's asking them what you want to wear today and giving them options and then they can choose. Again, a good friend of mine, South Asian parent, Her son, her son, younger son, would often choose dresses, and some days he would choose pants. And he's like, today I just want to wear a skirt and play with my trucks, and like that's what they wanted to do. So a lot of different options, but I would say modeling it first, because that's what they observe. They see what you do and hear what you say. Also think about what inputs and what options they have to experiment and explore. Okay, Archana.
Hey, Yomina, thank you for that wonderful presentation. That was really insightful. Question I have is, so like you said, this is all new vocabulary, at least it's new to me. I'm sure it's new to a lot of us. So what happens when older folks like us who didn't have the language to identify identity in these terms? Why is it important to reconcile your gender or sexual identity from a Vedantic perspective?
Well, I would say that from a Vedantic perspective, I would say that if one of the gauges for self-development is how we're growing our empathy, how we're growing our empathy often includes how we listen to other people. And so when we don't acknowledge the pronouns of someone we love or care about, or someone who's a literal stranger who we're meeting, perhaps we are falling a little bit lower on that scale of empathy than is conducive for self-development. So I guess that would be one answer I might offer from a Vedantic perspective, not as an expert again. And it's like, in terms of getting used to new words, new language, like I feel like every day I'm learning something about gender and sexuality, even though I'm like technically considered a professional and like work with teens and am exposed to this on a more regular basis. It's just to accept the fact that we're constantly learning, and it's okay to make mistakes, and that we have to apologize, and then we move on. Don't make it a big deal. I think that's probably the main thing I feel. And that in talking to a couple other folks, I was like, what would you say if someone used the wrong pronouns with you, or made a comment about your gender sexuality that was incorrect, and they realized they made the mistake? You just apologize, correct yourself, move on. When you make it a big deal, it puts a lot of pressure on the other person. Kind of in the same way, like a really good example might be name pronunciations, right? Like if someone makes a huge deal about how they've mispronounced your name, there's a lot of pressure to be like, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it, like let's just move on, in a workplace, in a school environment. So you don't want to do that. That is a really good question. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to move to a question from the chat. Okay, how to assess a Balavihar parent's openness to gender and sexuality? As a teacher, I feel scared to be open during Balavihar with parents of youth. I don't want them to stop sending their children to class. So I also am getting a lot of messages from youth, like interspersed with these questions, and I would like to say out loud is that they're desperate for spaces to express themselves freely. So if you, as an adult who has some modicum of influence within an institution, in this case, your local center, but whether it is your circle of family friends, or I don't know, your workplace or anything like that, I feel like and you have some level of care and interest in this topic, which this question indicates a care and level of interest. I feel like it behooves you to just talk about it. Just talk about it. The repercussions of not talking about it for young people are greater than whether or not a parent gets angry or upset. We're adult, for the question asker, we're adults. We can take that. We can take that to an extent if someone gets upset at us. What we can't take is a young person not feeling like they belong, or like they need to feel like they belong in this environment, because we're saying that the highest message is belonging. If the highest message is belonging, and we're not sharing that in this every single facet of one's existence, like, what is the point? And I say this, I say this as someone who struggled with mental health. I'm not speaking with my gender sexuality hat on, but like more as someone who has experiences with mental health. Like, I struggled with depression since 7th grade. And if I didn't have the ability to write a letter or a story that my teacher, my English teacher, read and then was there for me, like, I don't know, like, if she worried about her response to me expressing something that was kind of scary, like, I don't know. You know, the ramifications of this are too deep not to take action. And like, not even an activist sense. This is literally just being a good person. Okay. Sorry, I get like both really defensive, protective. And I'm not sorry. I get protective, defensive, and passionate about this. I will not apologize. Okay. That was a great question. How do I talk to my parents about my sexuality, even if I'm unlabeled, bi-curious? I'm not sure how they would react or how comfortable they are. So there is no right or wrong way. You do this on your own timeline. Talking to parents about sexuality is it's like a nice to have, not a need to have, like, for that. I mean, like, in ideal world, you should be able to talk to them about it. But if you have any sort of hesitancy, you don't have to rush. You don't have to rush. Do it on your own time. And that is the right timeline. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. There's no such thing as too fast. There's also no such thing as too slow. I'm not sure how they would react or how comfortable they are. There's ways to sort of like get at it. Like, sometimes it's watching TV shows together, and like, you can kind of like pick up cues about how they like talk about certain characters that might be in the TV show. If it's watching news together, that might be stressful, but like, I recommend the TV show approach, just to get a sense of like societally what they're thinking. Maybe it's having a conversation. One of my favorite things to do is like, I tape oral history. Okay, I tape oral histories with my parents every time I'm home now. Like, I'll sit with like, turn on my voice memos and ask them questions about their childhood. That's a great way to get a sense of like what vocabulary they did have or didn't have access to, and how they conceptualize of their own selves, right? Like, when you understand how someone describes their own self, that might give you a sensibility of their comfort level with interacting with you on a bigger topic about you. And again, it's okay if you don't have a label for yourself. We have like, chat is popping off, so I'm gonna try to go faster. Okay. I sometimes struggle with some internal homophobia towards myself and my queer identity, and I was wondering if there was any way to tackle that. Ooh, okay. I just want to say, like, I hear you. I hear you in this question. This was such a relatable question. And I remember, I'll just share my own personal experience, because like, that's really what I can speak the most to, and maybe it'll be helpful and maybe it won't. It was after like the Pulse Massacre shooting in Florida that happened, and maybe like, I think it was 2016, I think. And that was the year, it was like shortly thereafter is when I was like, okay, I think the word queer fits for me. But then I also had a lot of struggles thereafter, after I had this sudden, it wasn't like a sudden moment. It was like all of my life was like it didn't have language, and suddenly I felt like I had language. Anyway, oftentimes I would talk to my own therapist, be like, can I even call myself this? Like, I only date men. Like, can I call myself queer? Like, am I queer enough? Like, is there some judge LGBTQ that is like going to adjudicate that, like, yes, you count. No, you don't. There's no such thing. So highly relatable that these concerns and questions might arise. And it takes a lot of work and time. So like, one is patience with yourself. Like, we've been taught one thing for a lot of our lives, and to undo some of that thinking can take time. I would write a lot if that works for you as a modality. Like, the more you get to know yourself and like spend time reading, writing, reflecting some of those tendencies you have, and even judging yourself in whatever way, judging yourself about sexuality, but like also judging yourself about X, Y, and Z other thing will get processed as you read, write, and reflect. And I would think about satsang, like think about who are the people you surround yourself with. Like, I got a lot of comfort when coming to Boston. There was like a South Asian community of creative community where there's like folks across the spectrum and the people who are really comfortable talking about it, because we all had similar growing up experiences or very different childhood experiences, but a comfort level where we could share with each other. And we could be like, oh, you had that question? I had that question too. And so that is also another way to think about it. And also, if you don't have access to that physical or even virtual community in this time, like Instagram is a great way to meet. I was going to say great way to meet people, but like find community and find accounts that like resonate with your personal experiences. So even if you're not at the point where you want to talk to another person about like any internalized homophobia you might have around your own identity, you might hear other people's stories or read about other people's stories in these kind of more general accounts that might click with you in one particular way or spark a direction of thinking. Awesome. There's some great sharing of resources. Okay. Cool. I think I want to uplift one comment from Smita, which is to say I use my she, her pronoun in my work signature to benefit my new clients from various backgrounds who are not sure if Smita is male or female or anything else, and haven't talked to me on the phone yet to identify my voice as a particular way. Even identifying people's voices on the phone can be kind of hard. So this is a way to go back to particularly the M of modeling in your email signatures and on the phone, just for clarity. Okay, questions. Okay. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through. Uplifting that, normalizing what types of toys and clothes kids want to engage with and not gendering is a way to support parenting. There's a lot of parenting resources in here. Okay, any thoughts on how to bring up the idea of not using boys and girls in the school system without being preachy? Oh, this is like a whole host of different words we can use. I like Googling it sometimes, and sometimes they come up with really funny ones. I can't think of the funny ones off the top of my head, but hey folks is a great one. Hey y'all, also another great one. Gender neutral, totally gender neutral. So I have been trying to move towards using folks. I'm less comfortable saying y'all because I'm from the Midwest and I sound very Midwestern. But yeah, that's another option. Okay, Rachna ji.
Nina, you are amazing. You're awesome. And I've just really, really enjoyed listening to you. I said I would go to bed 20 minutes ago and I can't get up. So I just wanted to tell you thank you, first of all. And I say you all the time, and I'm from the Midwest. You moved to Georgia, and that's what happens. I am curious to find out from you, maybe on a personal or not so personal level. I feel like sometimes with psychologists, there's a lot of psychologists that are faith-based, and those visits are confidential. Parents don't always know what's going on in those visits. And I do sometimes worry that when it's a faith-based visit, is there conversation of somebody trying to change who a person is, or is there somebody, you know, that's giving a directive that's not, you know, where it's not an open and inclusive environment? Do you have a way to know, like, okay, who would be somebody that is more inclusive psychologist to go to, or who would be somebody that's maybe not a faith-based person to go to, or guidance as far as how to find a psychologist or a therapist or counselor?
That is a very important question, because I think particularly if young people or adults can't talk to folks around them, professional support is usually like the next option that people are considering. And now if you're not sure about the messaging in that professional space, that can be very challenging. One, I would like to affirm that, like, in general, like in terms of conversion, like people call it conversion therapy, or in the data I showed, it was like the 6 out of 10 LGBTQ youth have experienced someone who tried to change them in a particular way. Like healthcare workers are on that list, but they're like low. So that's maybe, I don't know if it's comforting, they're still on the list, but like relative to the other categories, it is much like the other categories of relationships: parents, friends, religious leaders, healthcare workers is low. So that is some comfort, in the sense that I think on average, particularly psychologists that are being trained now are gaining additional exposure in their own education around these topics. It's still a work in progress. In terms of finding inclusive resources, one that comes to mind, one that comes to mind is inclusive therapists. Like, I think if you Google it, it should come up. They definitely have an Instagram account. They definitely include a directory of professionals who identify either as queer or like as a person of color. Therapy for Black girls is another directory or resource for folks as a starting place. Also, surprise, Psychology Today, also surprisingly a good starting place for thinking about finding a professional. At least I can only speak to the US experience. I'm less familiar with the health system in Canada for finding a mental health professional. And if Madhav or anyone else who is familiar with that space is in the chat, please go off and share some resources. But Psychology Today, you can like search by a variety of expertise. Like for me, it was really important to have someone who could talk, like I wanted to be able to talk about my South Asian upbringing, and I also wanted to talk about sexuality, because like that was something I was like exploring and had a lot of confusion around. So because it's like a self-identified index, like I found a professional who like we're still going strong 4 years later, like who meets those needs. So Psychology Today. And also you can search by healthcare insurance. I know that is a concern for a lot of folks, is what is covered, what isn't covered. So initial directions. One, we don't have to worry as much about healthcare professionals, even though we do have to worry a little bit. And then second, there's a multiplicity of directories, inclusive therapists being one, and then Psychology Today. having like a good filtering system for finding someone who's in network and has expertise in a particular dimension that you're seeking support in. Again, starting place, non-exhaustive. I'm sure 5 other things will come to me after. Okay. Do you have any suggestions for dealing with people who ridicule you for supporting and defending those who do not identify with a specific gender or are a part of the LGBTQ plus community, etc.? You know, I use this a lot when talking to folks who might say something that's Islamophobic or like anti-Black. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. Or like, huh, why do you say that? Or like I repeat the thing back at them and give them a very concerned face. And usually that is enough to do the trick that they maybe said something that's not okay. Or they can't go deeper than what they shared. That's one strategy. I would be interested if any of you have strategies in your own spaces and communities, what you would share to this question. Dealing with people who ridicule you for supporting and defending those who do not identify with a specific gender or part of the LGBTQ plus community. Also, you know you're doing the right thing. Like, I just want you to hold on to that. Like, gold star. I'm not a judge LGBTQ plus, but I can give gold stars. I'm gonna give you a gold star. Hold on to that. You know you're doing right. You know you. Like, we have this innate sense of doing right. It shouldn't matter what other people are saying, even though I know sometimes it does. Just be silent. Keep doing your thing. You might be in a context where no matter what you say, they won't listen or absorb, or maybe they're not even open to changing their mind whatsoever. And so it's like, yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's also another one I say a lot. Thank you for sharing that. And then I just nod quietly and think about other things, work on my to-do list. Okay. What is the difference between preference and agency when defining gender sexual identity? Okay, this is a really great question because I can see how what I shared might make it seem that, oh, preferred pronouns, that's not what we say. We say pronouns, we don't say preferred pronouns. And agency, being able to choose what you prefer. Like, I can see how that might appear contradictory. So I appreciate this question. Okay. Difference between preference and agency. So when we say preferred pronouns, sometimes there's an implication that like we're only sharing to make other people feel comfortable. Whereas agency is like I would say preference is like us interacting with another person in some ways. And we're assuming something. We're assuming that maybe we're assuming like, oh, Sonia G is someone who looks like who might have a preferred pronoun. Like, what does that mean? Yeah, you're making an assumption about someone's appearance and how they might identify. Whereas agency is more like, I'm asking like, Sonia G, what are your pronouns? You know, like that, like I'm giving the agency and control to Sonia G to make that distinction. I'm only saying Sonia G because you're literally the first Zoom box that I'm seeing right now. So that's a short answer. Okay. Scrolling. I love these book suggestions. We'll have like a full book list. I'm so behind in the chat. Okay. Okay, show resources. Okay, are there any other LGBTQ plus Desi youth resources you're aware of and could share? Yeah, there's an organization called DAKE, which is the Desi LGBTQ plus help hotline, but it's also a community of folks. You could volunteer for them. It's a bunch of like peer counselors. bake. I don't know if there's any point in me typing in the chat because there's 60 new messages according to mine. So bake, DEQH, and that'll pull up some LGBTQ plus basic youth resources. If you happen to be, well, actually, there's some of their projects are virtual this year. In Chicago, there's Chicago Desi Youth Rising, and in the Bay Area is the Bay Area Solidarity Summer. And both have youth programs that are more, they're not really focused on Vedanta in particular, but they're focused on organizing. And I would say like it's a really inclusive environment to find like-minded youth who care about making change in their communities. So in the Bay Area, that's BASS, Bay Area Solidarity Summer. In Chicago, that's Chicago Desi Youth Rising. Yeah, CEDAR. Other youth resources, a lot of people, there's so many great writers, poets who are queer and South Asian. Fatima Asghar is one of them. Alok Ved Menon is another. They are incredible, both on Instagram. Those are like two, and they also have collections that are out. There's also so many more resources I'm probably forgetting, but we know this. I gave you the disclaimer that I don't know everything. Okay. Okay. How do you explain or talk about sexuality with an elder who says Hinduism or any religion for that matter doesn't allow it? I would first I would ask them, like, where did you read that? Show me the reference. That usually works. I don't know if everyone can produce a specific reference for some of these. So oftentimes people have an opinion, but they don't have the research to back up that statement. So that would be one thing. And also I don't know the nature of the conversation, but like Vivekji has touched on what is the highest message. The highest message is oneness. Like if the highest message is oneness and we're saying things that like these things are not part of oneness, that means you don't believe in oneness. Like there's inherent contradiction in all of this when I think about it. Like for me, I personally think that if as a Vedantin, I'm saying love or oneness is the highest message, and I'm not including that, I'm not including everyone in that, like that means I don't have faith in the message that love and oneness is the highest message. Right? Like in Advaita Vedanta, there's no space to discriminate because there isn't any other to discriminate against. Everything's one. So if we're saying that something says no, it doesn't fit in that message. Personal opinion also backed up by Vivekji. Okay. My parents are immigrants from India and have a hard time understanding and accepting LGBTQ and Black Lives Matter and movements like that. I have friends that are part of both communities, and I try to be accepting to everyone. How do you think I can help them understand? Thoughts from our community that are still online? What strategies would you offer this young person? Particularly, maybe if you're an immigrant from India and you are older and you have some wisdom to share on this. Because some of the strategies I share may not be super useful. But maybe if you're a parent, if you can share your perspective, or if you're a caregiver or a teacher or just someone who's been around the block and you can share your perspective, that would be awesome. And I'm going to scroll all the way down and try to uplift. Invite them to a session such as this one. Yeah, so think about what are opportunities in the communities that you're a part of where you can do something together. Like that could be one way of bringing them into the conversation. Like, I realized when I was home that my dad liked to talk about taxes and my retirement a lot. And I decided that that wasn't something I wanted to always talk about, that like it would be nice to have other areas of conversation. So we started tuning into easy evenings together. And that just became gave us a new vocabulary for conversing. We can be in satsang rather than talking about my taxes, even though sometimes I should talk about my taxes. So I'm going to uplift some other comments from here. Just starting conversations about it. And I know that's difficult and much easier said than done, but I think we just need to talk about it and help them see your point of view. The parents are mostly influenced by their other peers. So maybe if you can find an uncle or aunt who understands LGBTQ identities and help the parents understand better. Yeah, that's a great one. Another, it will take a lot of patience, but don't be afraid to at least start the conversation. Ask them questions about what frames their thoughts. Yeah, again, once you understand the other person, like one, you're able to feel a little more empathy from where they're coming from, and then you also know how to tailor your message. Continue to invite friends to your home and let your parents experience that all are humans, not that different. Indians love giving food and tend to respect their guests. That is very true. That is very true. And it would be nice if we lived in a world where like personal experience wasn't the only way we felt empathy. But you know, sometimes if that's the starting point, like let's take it. Let's take every tool in our toolbox and use it. Open, befriend, and be sensitive of their past experiences. Sometimes, explain it using a scientific point of view instead of a matter of inclusivity. There are a lot of studies on LGBTQ plus topics. This is true. This is true. And a lot of them do show, like, from whatever indicator you're looking at, when family and community and society is not supportive, it leads into like negative health outcomes. And like negative health outcomes means like, yeah, mental health issues, but it also means death in like some cases. That is the negative health outcome. Share a story of a friend who may be going through some rough times that your parent may know and love, or you know you love. Oh, Supriya told me to do my taxes. I'm ignoring that. Rashmi shares, my dad and I started book club for ourselves this year, where I suggest books that I'm reading and he listens and reads them. So we would debrief and slowly I would make my suggestions for things that might move the needle with him on certain topics. That's perfect. Again, sometimes it's hard bringing one's personal experience, like my friend or myself, into a conversation with our parents. It can feel really emotional. It can feel really fraught, understandably so. So things like popular media, books, television, podcasts, etc. Those are like safe third spaces to develop some sort of shared ground where you can meet and have a kind of conversation. Okay, let's see if we'll wrap this up in like 5 minutes. I know I probably will not have gotten into all of the questions. Let me see where I can. I'm fine. I clearly need better glasses since I'm like leaning into the screen. Okay. Oh, I'm so glad that some of you are watching with your kiddos. That was a direct message, but like shout out to all y'all with your kiddos around. Okay. Oh, beautiful. I am seeing some experiences around modeling. I won't read them out loud, but again, I hope you're keeping up with the chat. There's some really rich discussion happening here, both around like affordable counseling resources and working within the school system. Okay. Yes, brown girl therapy is another resource I would uplift. Okay. What is a good, Someone shared, what is a good way to talk to my parents about sexuality if I'm not sure how they would react? I think we have like a whole host of suggestions that may or may not work for your context about like shared media to maybe think about, to get a sense of how they might react. Conversations about their own personal experiences and how they grew up and how they think of relationships, just so you know where they're coming from. And sometimes it is like say now, explain later. Like, for example, when I shared, like, I think I shared a post on Facebook when I started using the word queer that was like, I'm really appreciating the privilege I have as someone who looks like very feminine, walking the streets safely as a queer person. Like, people don't look at me and think like, oh, she's a queer, like anything like that. And my mom texted me and she's like, what does queer mean? Like, what does femme mean? Like, she texted me and I was like, okay, I should have considered this a little bit before I posted it on Facebook. But like, now we're having the conversation and we had the conversation. And because she reached out to me, like, it opened up a more productive way of talking about things. Like, we all know the difference between unsolicited advice and solicited advice, right? Like, what are the chances of you listening to unsolicited advice? Close to none. But when someone reaches out and asks for advice, they're more likely to listen to it. In this case, she wanted to know and she reached out. And I think that really speaks to our parents' openness. Maybe they are actually far more open than we give them credit for. There's no right or wrong way. Okay. This could go on for a very long time. Oh, okay. Two more questions. Two more questions. I can't resist. Okay. How do we reconcile the us versus them mentality that I feel many straight people, straight and cisgender people who are not comfortable in the community have? Yeah. Like, we're thinking like, oh, there's an us, there's like an LGBTQ, and then there's like them, these, rather than thinking like we all have genders and we all have sexualities. That was like one reason I opened up by asking if anyone had experiences where they couldn't go into a mandir or perform a specific ritual because they were menstruating, or if they had been called effeminate or something like that, while growing up, because chances are we've all had an experience associated with a gender and sexuality, but we just didn't know, like, we just didn't categorize it as such in our like mental memory bank. And I think for me, that really dissolved the us versus them mentality. Because at a certain point, like, as we talked about, as we're breaking down parts of LGBTQ+, you could add a lot of different letters in there, right? Like, technically it's a spectrum, so it's like infinite. And then on one end, if you just had like cis straight and then this infinite spectrum, like, it's a very strange feeling of us versus them. Like, it would be better to be under an umbrella all together and cozy and comfy. And understand that they're probably on their own unlearning, learning journey. Like, unlearning takes a lot of time. We've been taught a lot of things for a very, very long time in a particular way. And yes, people should learn faster and they should use the right pronouns and they should be accepting of all sexualities and things like that. But it does take some time. It does take some time. I just don't want you to expend your energy trying to convince people who are not open, right? We started with affirmations of being open and being curious. And if people are not meeting those bare qualifications of being open and curious. And last, my parents are accepting, but I don't know how to talk to my brother about it. Do you have any suggestions? I would like, so, and during pandemic, I've started FaceTiming my sister every day. Like, I'm definitely a delinquent child who doesn't talk to my parents very regularly, like as regularly as they would prefer. But with my sister, we started getting into this habit of like checking in with each other at least once a day. Maybe creating a way of checking in with your brother on a regular basis. Not just so you can talk about sexuality or gender, but maybe so you have the opportunity to get to know what's going on in his day to day. What are the things that are like stressing him out that he cares about, who he's dating, like not dating, etc. And then you start to see them as a full person with like concerns and things that are outside of them, outside of like what you remember them as. I remember a very powerful moment for me was when my sister and I lived together as adults. When it was the first time we had done so after like I was in college and she was in high school, etc. So we were both in our late 20s at that point, and I just saw her as a different person. Like I had to relearn that she was not this high school younger sister I had. And so in that way, regular communication about all kinds of things, big, small, might open some space for talking about your own personal identity. Because like the more you ask questions, usually people are, especially if it's a relative like you care about, they'll ask in return, particularly a sibling, hopefully, knock on wood. Okay, this is where we have to end because it's 10:45, and even though we're all working from, even though I'm working from home, we all need to sleep. I will look up some youth-specific resources focused on like how like I'm South Asian and I'm LGBTQ. How can I find other like-minded folks? I'll try to sift some of that up and pull together a list. And so like maybe sometime next week, go to chinmayaniagara.com and I will have it posted I'll have it posted as one of her featured posts. We'll make that happen. That is a thing I can commit to. Deep breaths, we did it. We did it, we're here. What a great community. Hari Om, everyone. And I will see you this week. See you at Maharama Jayanti. See you on Wednesday. Hari Om, everyone. Take care.